What's going on, guys? Amer Kamra here. I came down from Toronto to Truth Gym Gallery in Victoria, BC with one of my clients, IFBB Pro, Karen Johnson. She turned pro last year at this time, so it's only been a year since she turned pro naturally. And since then, she's won a few Masters Pro shows. She's been very close to qualifying for the Mr. Olympia contest in the bikini category. And she's obviously done insane and amazing on her own, getting to this point. But now we really want to fine tune getting her to the next level with her training and tweak a few things to really isolate certain body parts that we want to improve on and really make drastic changes to, so that her body can flow even better and be a bit more complete. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're going to get started with her training, and we'll go over a few things that you guys can learn some things from as well. So something that's very important to consider when you're looking at any type of training with an individual is making an exercise built for that individual instead of accommodating to yourself to a machine or an exercise. And that's what a lot of people do, is they accommodate themselves to a machine or a particular exercise. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna build and modify every exercise that she does so it's a bit more optimized for her. Especially with Karen, she's quite tall. People don't realize that. Karen, how tall are you?
5'9".
5'9". So she's quite tall. It's even for a bikini competitor, she's quite tall. And like now, you know, based on your bone lengths, the exercise that you do and how you execute them are going to change, because there are individual mechanics and leverages that change and vary from person to person. So we want to make sure that it's optimized for her. For example, if you do a split squat, when you do a split squat and you're using a bench, that bench is universal for everyone. So not everyone is the same height. So if a person that's 5'4" or a person that's 5'9" is doing it, the depth that they're going to get is going to be different depending on their height. But we want to make sure that it's optimized for the person themselves that we're working with. So really what we're trying to do is we're trying to work on one leg at a time. That's the purpose of a split squat. So we're completely isolating one leg and we're trying to inhibit everything else. So one thing that we do, and Karen obviously has a very good intuitive style of training. She's very knowledgeable. She understands her body. She understands how to execute motions. And she understands how to build an exercise correctly. So what she's doing is she's stabilizing her body by holding something. So she's not relying on external or internal stability. She's not relying on internal stability. She's creating it externally by holding something. The second thing is working that left leg, that front leg. That's what she's working. So what she's doing is that she's sitting back on the hip. The only reason why that other leg is even there is to really stabilize your hip so that you're not twisting. Right? So imagine when you're doing it, you got to think that you're putting all the weight on that one leg and that other leg is not even really touching. The only reason why it's touching is to stabilize your hips so there's no rotation in it. Otherwise, you'd be turning because you have to rely on stabilizing that center of mass. So she's just going through a warm-up set. The first thing that you always want to do when you're doing sets, let's say you're doing 4 sets, the first set is just feeling it out, making sure you're getting the path of motion right, you're getting the setup, all the cues right in your mind. The second one, what we'll do, and the third, fourth one, what we'll do is we'll make it a little bit harder and a little bit more challenging by adding some manual abduction. So I'm going to shove on her leg a bit, and she's going to shove it outward as she comes up. That way we have some resistance both in hip flexion, hip extension, and abduction, adduction. Flex that hip back. There you go. Good. So another one. Another one. Let's go. Another shove outward. Nice. Okay, so we already have the resistance of gravity, right? There's this virtual guidance that already exists. So as she's going down, there is a challenge to hip extension as she's going downwards. So what's bringing her up is her glute. Now, there is no resistance challenging abduction, so the glute medius isn't being worked as much in that equation. So to optimize the exercise, what I'm doing is creating some external resistance. That external resistance is shoving into the leg, and because I'm shoving into the leg, she's shoving it outward, and she's recruiting the glute medius muscles, and that's the resistance that I add there. Obviously, you might not have someone that you can do it with, so what you might want to do is have a band that's pulling in that direction, and that way you're shoving outward against it. And that way you can just optimize the exercise. You can get a little bit more. And training and building exercise is about getting a little bit more from everything that you do. Another thing that I'm doing to just pay attention to is that where I'm pushing, I'm creating a point of application. It's not at her knee. First of all, she has knee problems, right? So we understand that. Like, you know, we all have like different injuries and our joints hurt and whatever. But I'm not shoving at the joint. You never want to do that anyway. So if you're going to put a band or you're going to do any sort of manual resistance, you want to move it away from the joint. So I'm shoving just higher than the knee. That way it doesn't bother her knee when she's doing it or anything like that. Okay? Some of the feedback that she got even from the judges from the last few shows was just to come in a little bit fuller, which means like she doesn't need to be bigger. It's not about being like substantially bigger. It's just like a little bit fuller, a bit more pop. And obviously when you're taller, you have a larger frame to fill out, a larger bone to fill out. So it takes a bit more time, especially when you do it naturally, right? It's harder to get that pop and that fullness, but she's very close. So when you go into really good gyms like this, you have an opportunity to train with a lot of different variety of exercise equipment, right? Like they have amazing equipment here, very unique pieces that a lot of gyms don't have. So one thing that you have to do in life is like when you're with your training is figure out what pieces of equipment are best for you or what pieces of equipment can you accommodate yourself best to, and then build those exercises specifically. So although they have amazing equipment here, you don't want to change equipment every week. You want to find those pieces, and because you have variety in a gym like this, you find those pieces that are congruent with what you need out of your training, and you stick to those pieces and you get good at it. Repetition's the mother of skill. The more that you can practice and get reps on those pieces, the better you're going to get, the better results that you're going to get. So secondly, we're going to do leg press. I like the Atlantis leg press, very good piece. I've never done this with Karen on this piece, so we're going to do it and then figure out her setup. Remember, set number one is just feeling things out. You don't need to go aggressive or put heavy weight. Just feel it out, get your path of motion, get your nervous system firing to figure out exactly how to do what you're trying to do. And then the second, third, fourth set, you start adding weight. So we'll add a bit of weight. I've witnessed Karen train in person a few times. I've trained with her a few times. And something that I've noticed with her and other people that look amazing is how they train, how they execute. They're not just loading a lot of weight on. They're not just trying to do it like very barbaric style training. It's very concentrated. It's very isolated. It's very diligent. It's very like intentional. The key word is intentional. If you're just training to do an exercise, you're not going to get anything out of it. If you're training with intent of getting something out of it, and really focusing on like internally contracting that muscle, you're going to get so much more out of it. And that's like the skill that she has mastered, the skill that I try to teach everybody to master, because that's what's going to get your physique to the next level. So what we do with the setup of her feet, she understands where to set up. She's obviously very advanced. But people think if I put my feet much higher, I'm going to get way more glutes, or if I put my feet much lower, I'm going to get way more quads. It doesn't necessarily work that way. It is, the reason for that is because the setup, where you're setting yourself up doesn't change. You're always sitting on that seat. So the only thing that you can really change is where your feet are on that platform. And what that does when you change where your feet are is you're altering the mechanics and the moment arm to the knee, which means you're using more or less quad. You're not using more or less glute, you're just using more or less quad in the equation by increasing or decreasing the range of motion. The higher your feet are, the less of a range of motion there is for your knee, which means less of a quad exercise. So if you want more quad, you put your feet lower. That way you get a bigger knee flexion in the exercise, a greater degree of knee flexion, which means more knee extension, which means more quad event. So two functions of the hamstring. One function is flexing the knee, so bending the knee. And the other function is extending the hip. And a lot of people don't consider that second function, so they're not fully contracting the muscle of the hamstring. She understands how to do it, so I'm gonna break it down for you so you actually get to see how she's doing it and why she's doing it that way. So obviously, as you're doing a hamstring curl, your knee is flexing anyways, right? That's what's naturally happening. So you don't need to worry about that per se. But what you do want to consider is like shoving downward into this pad from the hip and the top of the quad so that you can extend the hip. Okay, because what most people do, they actually flex the hip and raise the hip up as they bring the pad up. And what you're doing essentially there is you're chasing a contraction. As you're flexing the knee, you're contracting the hamstring. But when you flex the hip, you're lengthening the hamstring from the other end. So if you lengthen the hamstring from the other end, you're doing the exact opposite of what you're trying to do, which is shorten the muscle. Okay, so you can see that little nuance of what she's doing. She's extending the hip upward. Exactly, good. Extend the hip upward. Nice, good. Right, don't change the position of this, Karen. Keep the knees, exactly, good, nice. How'd that feel? Good, right, so again, she already really understands how to do it, so we're not like breaking it down on a micro level for her. But the next set, we're gonna push it to failure. What I want you to do on the next one though is at the top when you're extending the hip, flex the knee a bit more because you're letting go of knee flexion a little bit. So as you're bringing it up, you're extending the hip and then you forget that like you're flexing the knee, right? Because naturally your mind is going from one to the next, but like put both of them together now. Simultaneous, knee flexion, hip extension, okay? I'm not a huge fan of like arbitrary rules in your training, like do 10 reps or rest for 2 minutes or rest for 60 seconds. I think a lot of it should be intuitive, and obviously as you get better at your training, more of it becomes intuitive. So the rest between your second set and your third set and your fourth set shouldn't really be the same because like obviously you're more exhausted. Obviously the set intensities increase. So maybe on the third one you need a bit more rest, like right now, right? Yeah. Nice, good. That was better. Okay, so shove downward on my hand as hard as you can. Shove down into my hand as hard as you can, exactly. That's how we're cueing hip extension, shove downward. Nice, very good. Shove down, all your weight down onto this hand. Nice, very good. That's it. Okay, extend slowly. Now shove downward, knee flexion, hip extension. Good, 4 more like that. Let's go. Dig deep into these reps. Dig deep into these reps. 3 more. Let's go, shove downward, shove your body down, pull yourself down, 2 more. More hip extension, you can get a bit more than that. Go. Pull this together, pull this together, pull this together, and good, relax. It's okay, that's what you want. I mean, that's what you want, right? You want to get to the point where you can't do it. Does that feel good? I was thinking we needed a high five for that. So because I'm such a huge fan of concentrated and isolated training and we want to optimize your training to that specific joint, what we're trying to do is work her hip extensors here. So what we're doing is we're completely inhibiting everything else. The key to isolation is inhibition. So we're inhibiting her lower back, we're inhibiting her hip instability. That's why we're doing one leg at a time. And we're completely isolating her contractions to one glute at a time, deep hip extension because now she has hip support. And that's the problem with like cable kickbacks and other exercises. There's no hip support, there's no hip stability, and you want that as proximal to the joint as possible on the other side of the joint. So to really maximize her glute contractions, we want support on the other side of it, which is her hip, okay, or her hip bone. So shove downward into my hand, good, contract everything to this point. Remember, a muscle contraction is taking 2 points together as hard as you possibly can. So we know where the insertion and the origin of the muscle is, here and here. We're bringing these points together as hard as you possibly can. Bring them together, together, together. Rotate the femur. So rotate the femur outward. The knee should face to the side. Good, that's it, very good. From here to here. Contract these 2 points. Good. Shove downward, turn this more, Karen, turn this more. No, don't turn your body, turn the leg, exactly, good. Go again. Turn the leg, turn the leg, that's it. See, she's trying to avoid that range that we want her to get into where she has a bit of weakness, and that's what we're gonna get access to those fibers that she's struggling to get. Go. How'd that feel? Okay, so you gotta make sure you're rotating. Like you're coming backward, but you're not wanting to go outward. And when I'm telling you to rotate, you're rotating at the top where there's no resistance, right? So you have to rotate so that the muscle fibers are on top of the joint, so that those glute medius fibers are in the equation. okay? So just like think about rotating the thigh a bit sooner. So bring this point to this point, but rotate as you do it. Exactly, good. That's it, that's what you're missing. So bring this to this, okay? Nice. Shove downward, all your weight is downward. Okay. So we create support here and we create support and stability and restraint here. The reason we do that is because the weight is coming back and up. So we want to create restraint forward and downward. Good. Shove everything into this point here. Bring this. Yes. Rotate, rotate, rotate. That's it. Good. Rotate as hard as you can. Very good. That's, you see your tie-in. You see all of that working. Good. Nice. Good. Very good, Karen. Good. Take your time. Contract. Deep, hard contractions. Get that external rotation. External rotation. Very good. Come on, 5 more. Good, 4 more. And now, because she's isolated everything and removed all of the constraints out of the exercise, she's able to get way more output, way more reps, way bigger, deeper contractions. Keep going, come on, keep going, keep going, keep going. 3 more. 2 more. 1 more. Good, relax. How much better is that, right? You guys can see, like, she got way more out of it simply because now she's isolated everything and created way more stability in the exercise. And when you do that, you're just able to optimize it, right? Because your limiting factor, whether you realize it or not, to most exercises, is your ability to produce force. And if you cannot produce force because you're limited to your instability, to not having restraint, to relying on balance, to relying on all these things, or lack of balance, or trying to create internal stability to offset the lack of balance, well, then what happens is you end up not doing as many reps as you possibly can. So now you end up doing 5 sets, 6 sets, 7 sets to try to get what you're trying to get out of in much less.
It's not efficient.
Yeah, it's very inefficient, right? And the goal of training should always be to create maximum efficiency in your training, right? Effectiveness is one thing. Everything is effective. If you come in here and you work out, you finish your workout, it's effective. But the goal is to be as efficient as possible, to get as much as you can in as little as you can, so that you're maximizing your growth or your gains or your progression on a shorter timeline or a shorter cycle. So your last set, right? Treat this set as like, this is the only set you got. Okay, if you had to come in here and only do 1 set, what would it look like? That's how you got to treat that last set. Okay, if this was your only set of the day, what would it look like? If all you could do is 1 set, how would it look? Keep going, keep going, keep going. Come on, get as much as you can out of it. Don't leave anything on the table. Take everything you can from it. Keep the abs tight. Take everything out of it. Okay, let's lower the weight. Okay, and go to the end of the range. Good, nice. Contract. Don't launch it. Keep the same velocity. Take your time. Contract it as hard as you can. Let's go, Karen. Good. Deep contraction. Stay calm. Right? Exercise is about staying calm. As soon as things get hard, like naturally we have an inclination to panic. Stay calm. Relax. Good. Nice. Contract. Contract. Very good. Squeeze everything, right? Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Good. 5 more. That's it. Very good. 4 more. 3. Very good. That's it. Come on. We're almost there. You're almost at the goal. Let's go. The goal is complete fatigue. You're almost there. Good. Go. You got a few more. Go. Go. I'll help you. I'll help you. I'll help you. Good. 1 more. 1 more. And good. Relax. Nice. Good work. Right. So the goal of what we're doing and why I'm even here working with Karen is to figure out like exercise that works specifically for her, so that again we can be more efficient and we're not doing 10 different exercises to try to get the same bang for our buck. We can do it in 4 or 5, and that way like we're just so much more efficient. Obviously that's a lot less strain on your body, your nervous system, your joints, everything, but like more than anything you're progressing in the right direction. Most people in my experience develop their body in a very inconsistent way, like or where they're consistently developing their disparities. So like if one body part's much stronger or bigger than the other, they just continue that disparity and they become a bigger version of a disproportionate self, right? So now they're like their shoulder to chest ratio is the same, it's just like they're bigger now, so it looks even worse. And that's what you don't want to do. You want to grow your body in a very symmetrical way, so that as you're growing and you're progressing, come here, close. As you're growing and you're progressing, you're creating more symmetry for yourself, not less. And that's, obviously as you build more muscle, it matters a little bit more, because like if your hip extensors are so big and your glute medius, your abductors are small, well, like it's much more noticeable as you grow, right? And that's why people don't realize how, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but how big you are relative to other girls. So like, how much muscle you have, how much your structure, because you're so proportionate, you're so symmetrical, right? And if, like I always say, you realize somebody, like it exposes the person's body when they are not symmetrical. So then you realize, like, okay, wow, their arms are really small, and then you realize, like, oh, okay, that's their true size because of that disparity between other body parts. But when you're like very symmetrical, you don't realize the person's size. It's very hard to tell, right? Yeah, said it like 5 times. Yeah, good. How do you feel? Good, good, perfect. So that's day 1.
Yeah.
We're gonna do shoulders tomorrow? Okay, perfect, yeah.